Where is your customer? That's a question that is increasingly being asked in opportunity and pipeline reviews. The question is aimed at understanding where the customer is in their buying process, or put more simply, where they are along a line that starts with the recognition of need and finishes with the purchase of a solution. So, where is your customer? There are two reasons why it matters where your customer is at in their buying process. The first reason is that it determines how you sell and indeed how you close. Ideally, the sales approach, the way of engaging with the prospect, should differ based on where the customer is at in terms of making a decision. How you sell to customer C, who is ready to make a decision between competing suppliers, should be different to the approach adopted when selling to customer A, who is at the earlier stage perhaps of recognizing and understanding needs or requirements. Where the customer is at determines the questions asked, information shared, and other aspects of the sales approach. So if you don't presently adjust your sales approach based on where the customer is, then it's a great opportunity. So that's reason number one for knowing where the customer is at. It determines how you sell or close with maximum success. The second reason why it matters where the customer is at is that it determines when you can and will close. If you want to get the customer across the line, then you need to know where they are now. But without complete information regarding where the customer is at, the salesperson must make assumptions regarding what deals will close and when. A better understanding of precisely where the customer is at is key to avoiding shocks and surprises. Salespeople know only too well that it often takes longer than expected for the customer to make a decision. It's not simply a matter of identifying a need and then buying a solution. In many organizations, there's a bureaucracy around buying, involving more procedures, committees, and paperwork. Furthermore, more purchase decisions are being subject to scrutiny from procurement or finance and must be justified or justifiable. All this adds to the time that's required in order to make a decision, and it can easily take the seller by surprise. How the buying decision is made is often described using diagrams with straight lines and square boxes. However, in reality, it can be a lot more complex. As sellers, we know only too well that the pace of buying is not always a steady one. When it comes to the buying decision, there are ups as well as downs. For weeks, the seller may be chasing the buyer for a response, and then suddenly the buyer wants a quotation without delay. The deals can move backwards as well as forwards. One week the buyer may be talking about placing an order, and the next may have decided to seek competing quotes. All this makes it difficult to accurately forecast what deals will close and when. The problem is that for most buyers, the salesperson's looming quarter or year end matters little. Moreover, buying decisions don't take place in isolation, but rather within a sea of shifting organizational priorities, projects, and purchases. All our research into modern buying can be summed up in one sentence. Buying decisions are starting earlier and finishing later. So a simple question like where is the buyer is more complex than it might first seem. There can be a considerable gap between the recognition of a need and the point of contacting potential suppliers. It can be hard for any salesperson to get excited about buying process. That's understandable. So think of it this way. The buyer's decision as a journey. This will help us to better understand where the buyer is at and to increase our sales success as a result. Let's look at the buying process as a journey. The customer is here, but he or she wants to be there. But in the middle is a problem or a need. That's the gap between the customer's perceived present reality and the desired future. The journey from recognizing a need to buying a solution may take time. Indeed, it's unlikely that the buyer will make the decision in one great leap. Business to business purchases are not made on impulse, and even if there is a need, there is no guarantee that it will result in a purchase. So, what is involved in making the decision? What does the journey from need to purchase look like? The buying process can be surprisingly complex, even where the amount of money involved is relatively small. We polled salespeople last year to measure the level of complexity involved in their deals. They told us that the journey involved 5 people and the sale took an average of 150 days. The buyer's journey towards a purchase decision can have as many as 5 stages. Let's examine these stages one by one. Then we'll explore the implications for how we sell. Most people don't see a problem or gap. Either they don't have a need or they're not aware of it. Maybe they have an existing solution that they are satisfied with, or perhaps they are bound by inertia or resistance to change. We call this stage status quo. It's where most of the marketplace is at. They are not yet in shopping mode. Here, the buying journey hasn't started yet. Here, the customer is standing still in a state of homeostasis or inertia. To be successful, a salesperson wants to get a customer to move, but it can be an uphill struggle. The challenge is to create awareness of and sensitivity to the need. So what is it that makes it an uphill struggle? Well, there are a number of factors to look out for. No need, no awareness, no consensus, no urgency, no sponsor, no decision, or no budget. The seller's job is made a lot easier when the customer is aware of a need. However, a need may not be enough. The reality is that there are many needs, but they won't all get met. For an important purchase to happen in today's more strict corporate environment, the need has to be met with a decision, a budget, and maybe even a strategy. We call this the strategy stage. Today's important organizational buying decisions are slower, more deliberate, and more strategic. Even if the need is clear, getting approval or justifying a decision takes more time and effort. The strategy stage of the buyer's journey is the why stage. It is where the why buy question is answered.
Strategy is where the need or problem is not just recognized but becomes a priority. It is where priorities are set and budgets allocated. It is the analysis and planning phase, the essential primer to taking action. Where purchases stall, it is because something happened at this stage.
The why or strategy stage is where the salesperson can have the greatest impact. Yet, for most salespeople, it's the path less traveled. It typically requires getting involved earlier and engaging with what the buyer wants to achieve, not just around product features and benefits alone.
This is the territory of the consultative sale and the domain of the trusted advisor. Here, the stereotypical pushy salesperson is unlikely to be welcome. It requires a new engagement with the buyer and a deeper, richer conversation. Not traditional selling, or at least not hard selling. What is required at this stage is exploration, discovery, and discussion between buyer and seller. The conversation is different, and the product is not the message. Rather, it is the results that the product can help the buyer to achieve. The seller who is involved at this all important stage has a real advantage. He or she can connect their solution with what the buyer wants to achieve. That requires not just focusing on the buying decision, but also on the business decision behind it. Getting involved in these discussions separates the salesperson from all others. But of course, there is a cost in terms of the length of sale.
When buying decisions get stalled or scrapped, it is because something has gone wrong at this strategy stage. Some or all of the following may be required before a need results in a purchase. The need has to be clear. There's executive sponsorship and stakeholder alignment. There's justification for the business in terms of the business case. There's a decision or a commitment to take action or explore taking action. A budget and other resources have been secured, and there is a plan of action or practical next steps have been outlined or are on their way. So sellers can gauge their confidence in closing the deal based on their understanding of this stage.
When the need is met with a decision and a budget, the search for a solution gets underway. This is what we call the solution stage. At this stage, the customer is analyzing needs and exploring solutions. The process of analyzing needs and exploring solutions often takes place in a stepwise or progressive manner. It often starts with scanning the market to see what solutions are available. This typically leads to scoping a solution based on outline requirements. Ultimately, this should lead to specifying a solution based on detailed requirements. The search for an ideal solution often begins with scanning the market to see what solutions are available. Here, the antennae are up scanning for solution alternatives. This may be passive, simply stumbling across new solutions and suppliers, or active, for example, a supply market analysis. And it may be ad hoc or systematic in terms of the approach, range of sources used, and so on. Scanning the market for available solutions may take place without directly contacting potential suppliers, in particular involving sources such as web searches, industry directories, and analyst reports. Scoping the solution is an important step on the way to defining the detailed requirements from a solution. It makes sense to start with the more general needs and to progressively get more specific as regards the requirements of a solution. Doing it this way reduces the likelihood of getting the requirements wrong. So, first create a broad or outline definition of requirements against which possible solution alternatives can be explored. Scoping out requirements can result in a wish list rather than a clear specification of requirements. It can be dangerous to rush the solution stage. It can be all too easy to get the solution wrong because the requirements did not get sufficient attention. The level of thought that goes into defining the solution, the rigor of the analysis, the level of consultation with stakeholders, and the creativity applied in searching for a solution, these are all factors that determine a successful outcome. It is the seller's job to help the buyer to move successfully through this stage, helping him or her to analyze and indeed discover needs and explore solution alternatives in order to confidently arrive at the ideal solution. The message for the seller is don't assume your solution is the only or indeed the best alternative for the buyer. Here's why. The seller who pitches the ideal solution at the outset and fails to engage the buyer in exploring alternatives runs the risk of misunderstanding the buyer's needs and as a result can be at a real disadvantage. Ideally, it is a process of engagement between buyer and seller that results in co-creating the ideal solution. It sounds obvious, but the solution is the bridge between the strategy and the success. The implication for both buyer and seller is clear. You cannot define the solution without clarity on the strategy as well as the vision of success. So it is not just about the technical or functional characteristics of the solution, but the broader business case, including cost benefits, risks, compliance, etc. that matters. It's about the results, what it helps the buyer to achieve. The supplier stage is the search for the best supplier and it typically overlaps with the previous solution stage. In addition to looking for the optimal solution, buyers are also simultaneously searching for the best supplier. The ideal solution is a mix of optimal product or service and best supplier. For products and services that are standardized or off the shelf, there may be a choice of suppliers for any specific product or solution. However, where the product or service is customized, service or people dependent, such as for example in consulting services or software development, the solution and the supplier are a joint rather than a separate decision. Similar to the solution stage, the selection of the ideal supplier often takes place in steps. In this way, there is a progressive narrowing of the field in terms of suppliers under consideration until the ideal supplier partner has been chosen. The first stage involves scanning for suppliers and involves creating a long list of potential suppliers within a market or product area. This may be based on web searches, industry directories, and other sources. In terms of getting on the buyer's radar and making the long list, the seller's marketing and demand generation activities are important. Having created a long list of potential suppliers, the next step involves putting some order on that list and reducing it to a short list based on certain criteria. It is this short list of suppliers that will then be approached by the buyer. As sellers know only too well, it is important to get on the shortlist if there is to be any prospect of winning the sale. Shortlists of approved suppliers are increasingly being mandated by procurement, with a focus on the consolidation of supplier numbers in order to reduce complexity and cost for the buying organisation. So getting on the approved vendor list is often a key requirement for sellers. Ultimately, the process is likely to result in the selection of a single preferred supplier from among the shortlist. The process of supplier screening and selection may be based on a low or high level of interaction or engagement with suppliers. It may, for example, involve a formal or informal bidding process, such as a supplier beauty parade or a formal request for information or proposal. It is important to point out that sellers cannot wait until the buyer is ready to choose a supplier. The seller who arrives at this stage is likely to arrive too late in order to shape requirements and build influence. At such a late stage in the buyer's journey, where requirements have been set, there may be little left to discuss other than price. For sellers who are focused on value, this can be a real challenge. However, the traditional pattern of seller involvement, the point at which the seller appears during the buyer's journey, is shown here. In order to maximize the chances of winning the sale, the seller needs to be involved earlier. If the seller waits to be called by the buyer, then there is an increased likelihood that the seller is arriving into a competitive tendering situation. The seller who arrives early enough to create awareness of and shape the need has a real advantage. By contrast, the seller that appears late and announces himself or herself with a brash "Here I am now, we can really get things moving," is likely to be disappointed. He or she is blissfully unaware that the biggest part of the buyer's journey is already over. When confronted with this reality, sellers tell us that they believe the odds of winning the sale fall at this stage by as much as 300%. Getting involved earlier is key. It would be tempting to believe that the buyer's journey ends when a supplier and solution have been selected, or when a purchase order has been issued. The reality, however, is that it does not really end until the purchase has proven to be successful. This means that the seller's job is not done once the purchase order has been received. The promises made during the sale must now be delivered upon and the benefits realised. Managers, departments, and indeed suppliers are increasingly being asked to account for their performance. They are being measured against the promises made or targets set. We call this the success stage. It involves delivery or implementation and, most importantly, the achievement of the results required. The success stage is a closing of the loop in terms of the buying process. The journey is between the strategy and its success, the need and its resolution. A process that started with a vision of future success only really ends when that success has been realised. But success cannot be taken for granted. Success may not be instantaneous, rather it often emerges in steps. In particular, adopting any new product or solution can present challenges. Getting off to a good start is important. That includes delivering on time and the first experiences in using the product or service. A new product or solution may require new learning or even changes in behaviour among, for example, staff using it. There may be implications in terms of how the product or solution fits with existing systems, processes, or ways of doing things. At first, the end user may struggle, and product training and support is essential to help users meet these challenges and become familiar and comfortable with the product or solution. Thereafter, the customer begins to understand the full advantages of the solution and to witness results. More of the product or solution's features or benefits are being used or used more widely. The product or solution is deemed to be a success. Success does not last forever. Sooner or later, a point is reached where there is a striving for more than what the product or solution can deliver or has been delivering. This may result in the beginning of a new buyer journey and a search for the next product or solution. Or alternatively, it may involve other creative efforts to deliver more from the existing product or solution. Success is not just a stage, it's a focus or a mindset. Some customers are focused on the problem, others on the past that has created the problem, but it is a vision of success that propels the buyer along his or her journey. Neither the buyer nor the seller's job is complete until the results that were promised are achieved. Delivery, implementation, and customer support must deliver on the promises made to win the sale. All the time, the seller must manage the customer's expectations and experience, help the customer to ensure that the anticipated benefits are realized, and in particular, communicate the benefits achieved. Let's recap on all of the five stages of the buyer journey. The first stage is status quo. This is where the potential customer's needs are latent. Perhaps the customer is not aware of the problem or need, or the customer is bound by inertia or resistance to change. This can be an uphill struggle till a need is recognized and tension for change mounts. The second stage is called strategy. It is where the need or problem is not just recognized, but where it becomes a sufficient priority. This is the analysis and planning stage, the essential primer to taking action. It provides the downhill momentum for the purchase. The third stage is solution. This is where the customer is analyzing needs and exploring solutions. It progresses from scoping a solution based on outline requirements to specifying a solution based on detailed requirements. The fourth stage is supplier. This is where the customer is looking to select a supplier. It often begins with a long list, then a short list, and ultimately the selection of a preferred supplier. The fifth stage is called success. This is the implementation stage where the customer is focused on achieving the anticipated results or benefits of the purchase or project. Here is a checklist for each stage. Use it for any opportunity in your pipeline to identify what stages that the buyer is at and where you should focus your sales efforts. Don't worry if you cannot tick the boxes for any particular stage. The objective is to draw your attention to areas that may require focus. Perhaps you are missing some information in certain areas, or maybe there are areas that the buyer has thus far neglected. Either way, it's an opportunity for you as the seller to connect with the buyer on his or her journey and to maximize your success as a result. Let's conclude by recapping on the rationale for considering the buying decision as a journey and how it can boost your sales success. The sales community has traditionally looked at the buying decision through the old-fashioned stimulus response model, where a need was the stimulus and the purchase was the response. However, it's clear that this is too simplistic for modern. In the world of B2B selling, not all needs result in a purchase. That's very clear. But what must happen in order for a need to result in a purchase decision? Well, that's exactly what the model of the buyer journey reveals. The buyer journey reveals the five stages of the buying decision and the requirements of a complex B2B purchase. It has clear implications for sellers. Let's recap on those implications to conclude this video. The model of the buyer's journey shows us that many buying decisions have 5 stages. Most sellers, however, only work on 2 of them. They neglect the most vital ones of all. Sellers must meet the buyer where they are at. They must join the journey earlier and get involved more closely throughout. Key challenge is to help the buyer to clarify the destination, that is, the vision of success. I'm Ray Collis of the ASG Group. It's been a pleasure to share with you some of our research into how buying has changed and the implications for sellers. If you'd like to learn more, you can find our books on Amazon and other resellers, or find us at buyerinsights.com or the ASG Group website.